Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So I'm back today to do a little bit of an introduction to a series that I have been saying I've been wanting to do for a couple of months now, which is a video series in which I discuss the different books within the Penguin Monarchs series. I only have one of them to show you today, but rest assured I will be getting more of them as we go on. This has been a little bit of time in the making because whilst reading this first book has been like pretty much easy enough, simple enough to do, it's been more the scripting and the planning and, you know, like getting all of my ideas together that has taken a little bit more time. You know, I want this video series to be about the books themselves, but it's also about the history surrounding these different monarchs. And, you know, as we know, I love history. I've got my BA and my master's in different history subjects. So I love history and I want to do it justice and I want to make it engaging, even if you were not into history yourself to begin with. So yeah, that has taken a little bit of time to kind of get my head around. So I wanted to do a video series a little bit like this where I took a particular like edition or series of books and just worked my way through. I'd originally thought about maybe doing like the Little Black Classics by Penguin or doing Penguin's Great Ideas series, actually kind of inspired by Shah Reeds, who did a very similar series to this about 5 years ago. She started working through all of the Penguin Great Ideas series and I really enjoyed her take on each of these different important books. However, there's over 100 books in both the Penguin Little Black Classics line and the Penguin Great Ideas line, and that's quite intimidating. And then I remembered I'd been really intrigued by the Penguin Monarchs series. Whenever I'd seen it in shops, I'd been like, oh, I really want to get some of those. And since I do try to incorporate some sort of history content into my book discussions, I thought it would be the most appropriate series to choose. So the Penguin Monarchs series was launched back in 2015, and each of them act as a mini biography of different English and then later British monarchs through history. Each of them are written by a different historian, all of whom are very well known and respected within their particular time period. These books are around about 100 pages, give or take, maybe 20 pages either side of that, so they are definitely intended as being like quick, short introductions to each of these figures, like a quick biography of each of their lives and the impact that their reign had. They are not intended as deep dives and very detailed accounts on every single controversy and every single argument within that person's reign. They are much more meant to be overviews. That being said, I don't necessarily think that that means that each of these books are going to necessarily be impartial, because historians are notoriously very opinionated chaps, and I'm sure that that's going to leak over into these biographies somehow. Every monarch from William I onwards gets their own book. However, Penguin also opted to have 4 of the pre-Norman Conquest kings also have their own little books as well. So for those 4 pre-Norman Conquest kings, we have Athelstan, who reigned from 924 to 937, Ethelred the Unready, who reigned from 978 to 1013, Canute, who reigned from 1016 to 1035, and then Edward the Confessor, who reigned from 1042 to 1066. As you'll be able to tell from those dates, there are definitely some gaps there where there were other monarchs reigning England, but Penguin have chosen not to do little biographies of those monarchs, and there doesn't seem to be any news yet on whether or not Penguin are going to go back and fill those gaps and talk about those monarchs in their own books. However, I kind of feel like that's going to be a bit unlikely, combination of there being a lack of evidence for a lot of these early medieval monarchs, maybe just not enough public interest for them, or that these monarchs' reigns were just so short that it doesn't seem worth it to spend 100 pages on them. Disputed queens like my favourite, Empress Matilda and Lady Jane Grey, do not get their own individual books in this series, and perhaps most controversially, Oliver Cromwell, who was not a monarch but who reigned as Lord Protector between 1653 and 1658, does get his own individual instalment, whereas his son Richard, who ruled as Lord Protector for 249 days, does not get an instalment. And quite hilariously, while all the different royal houses within this series all have their own distinct colour so that you can kind of keep each house together and keep the order quite fresh in your mind, so for example the Plantagenets are all a dark blue, the Tudors are a dark green, whereas the Windsors are like a light blue, like grey colour. Oliver Cromwell's is just straight up black. It's kind of like Penguin are going, these were the dark days. I don't know, I just found that quite funny. So there are 2 different editions of each of the Penguin Monarch series that you can get. Firstly, these beautiful hardback designs. These are really pretty, and all of them come with this beautifully illustrated slipcover for each of the monarchs, all of which are new artwork. And then you've got these paperbacks which were released a little bit later, which are a little bit cheaper. These are £5. They are more affordable, a little bit more collectible. You know, you can pop them in your pocket and read them on the go. So there are different options depending on like your aesthetic preference and also affordability. So you might be thinking, why did you want to do a series on kings and queens? Like, isn't there enough content on them already? And the honest answer is, yeah, Yeah, there is. The truth is, I just find monarchs really, really fascinating. As I've said before, in my reading, I am very much a character-focused reader, and it cannot be denied how much the personality of individual monarchs does so much to shape policy. And that's especially true before the constitutional monarchy that we currently live under was established. And I also think it can't be denied that looking through history through such a constant figure like a monarch is a really good way of being able to get into different time periods and break them down and really track micro changes through a period, being able to constantly move through time with each of those monarchs, rather than when you're trying to track less tangible themes like social change or trying to track it through different, slightly less constant factors like war. I feel like the truth is, no matter what kind of history you try to focus on, you are always going to be missing some crucial aspect of that society. And the most notable one when you are looking at a monarch and their behaviour is you will often miss out the life and experiences of, you know, the regular people, us. When it comes to monarchs though, there is just so much more evidence for each of these figures than there is for pretty much any other person within that respective time period. And weirdly, because of that unbalanced proliferation of evidence for each of those figures, you end up getting a more solid sense of time when you work through each of these respective monarchs. Which, yes, is deeply, deeply unfair because these individual figures are nowhere near representative of the societies that they live in. But unfortunately, is the horrid truth. I'm definitely not coming to this pretending like I'm any sort of expert on these time periods, especially the early medieval period is not my jam at all. It's kind of a not so fun aspect of being a history student, is that if you ever tell somebody that you were a history student, they automatically assume that you know everything there is to know about every facet of history, and it's just not true. The amount of times during university where like I was talking to a relative or a family friend and they would ask me what I did and I said, oh, I'm a history student, and they'd be like, oh, a history student, so you know a lot about history. Well, tell me what happened on this day 1312 in Manchester, and I'm like, I don't know! So I definitely don't want you to think that I'm coming to this with like an overinflated sense of my knowledge of history. I don't really have a set structure on how I'm going to talk about each of these books and each of these monarchs. I don't think it's going to be like a full-on review of how this historian did, because like especially for early medieval monarchs, I just don't know the area well enough. And because these are very much like a little introduction, you know, you have to bear that in mind. I definitely want to try and pick up on like recurrent themes that a particular historian really tries to drive home within these little introductions. In one of my favourite podcasts, You're Dead to Me, Greg Jenner always starts off each episode with discussing so what do you know? In which right in the introduction he'll kind of discuss what a regular person who doesn't study history might know about a particular figure or whatever it is that he's talking about. And I think I kind of want to steal that, because I think there are definitely some monarchs where the history education, at least in Britain, is really focused on some people Tudors. And then there are other monarchs that may have had a great impact on Britain, but we really do not get taught about. I also just really want to drive home, like, there is some relevance in learning about monarchs and their lives and their personalities. Trying to draw out some sort of lessons that we can take from their lives, whether or not that is personally for ourselves or in the ways that we approach history and talking to the public about history. That's definitely my public history masters coming into play. Whilst I'm definitely going to try and go into the lives and what happened to each of these people, I don't want it just to be, these are the great things or the bad things that each of these monarchs did, end of story. I want it to feel relevant, because I feel like if there's nothing that you can take from these historic people and, you know, use it and apply it in today, like, what's the point? So I hope you found this little introduction to this video series interesting, and that you might consider joining me along this journey of talking through these different monarchs that Penguin has chosen to highlight. Like I say, I'm really, really fascinated by kings and queens, so I was like, yes, let's do this. I know it's not necessarily for everybody, and not everybody is coming to my channel looking for like history non-fiction, but I'm really, really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to any discussions that I have and anything that anybody else can tell me that's just gonna inform me even more, because I think history is really cool. Anyway, I think I will leave it there for now. Do let me know any questions you have about the series, anything you think I should try and include. Alternatively, leave me a comment telling me about which monarch you are most intrigued by. I will leave the list of all of the ones that are included down below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.